Okay, welcome back to my channel, my vlog, whatever the hell I'm calling it. Anyway, this is another week, and I've decided to share another blog post. This has just been published to my personal website, jlittle.com. So if you'd like to read the text version and not listen to me yak, which is likely going to be a lot longer, and it's going to take up a lot more of your time to listen to me than it will be to just read. So your choice is yours, of course. A lot of little side commentary you'll get here that you will not get in the text version. In any event, today's post is called "How to Become a Big Tech Exile," and this is how you kind of get to the point where you feel like your career doesn't really have any path forward, right? And part of that is you stick around long enough and you just kind of get jaded enough with the whole thing, right? But we'll go into some of the details. There are other things you can do too, which I have done, hence this post. So I have effectively been exiled from big tech. In this post, I'm going to give you my perspective on how that happened and my feelings about it. If you aren't interested in hearing this tale, let me go ahead and summarize it for you up front. Save you a ton of time. You're welcome. The values I grew to appreciate and build my work, and hence my tech career the last few decades around, are really just no longer in vogue. And I refuse to apologize for this, and I refuse to shift my position. Hence the growing impasse, or as I'm referring to it here, exile, right? So, and let me clear something up right up front. This is not some sort of official status. There is no central entity who rates and ranks and blackballs so-called tech professionals, right? There's no established set of rules or system in place that prevents me from plying my trade, at least not directly. The danger of the position I now occupy is far more insidious than that. While contemplating this post, the one reference that keeps coming up in my mind while I was thinking about this was the classic essay written by Eric S. Raymond, aka ESR, whom I will have the joy of probably sharing a room with at least once during the Southeast Linux Fest conference that starts, when I wrote this, it was a few weeks now. It's basically yeah, it's next weekend, so yeah, it's not a few weeks. Yeah, maybe I need to go and tweak that text. Anyway, the classic essay is called "The Cathedral and the Bazaar." If you haven't read it, it is worth a read. It's dated, but the principles expressed therein are not dated, and they still drive a great deal of the free and open source software movement. But yeah, so anyway, it is a rather long read. There's quite a few pieces here, and the last time it was revised was in 2000, but that doesn't really detract from its general level of education it will provide you. If you really want to understand a core fundamental of the free and open source software movement, you probably should read this at some point, if that kind of thing is of interest to you. I'm gonna go ahead and quote a good chunk of it that I think is relevant to the discussion at hand here. So, Linux overturned much of what I thought I knew. I had been preaching the Unix gospel of small tools, rapid prototyping, and evolutionary programming for years, but I also believed that there was a certain critical complexity above which a more centralized, priori approach was required. I believe that the most important software, operating systems, and really large tools like the Emacs programming editor needed to be built like cathedrals, carefully crafted by individual wizards or small bands of mages working in splendid isolation with no beta to be released before its time. So, just as an aside, I just love the way this is written, mostly because it portrays that he's probably spent a good chunk of his life doing role-playing things, playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is just cool as shit, but that's certainly not atypical for a classic Unix nerd, that kind of thing. But anyway, it's fun. Anyway, Linus Torvalds style of development: release early and often, delegate everything you can, be open to the point of promiscuity. Great use of the word promiscuity, came as a surprise. No quiet, reverent cathedral building here. Rather, the Linux community seemed to resemble a great babbling bazaar of differing agendas and approaches. Just as an aside, if you don't know what a bazaar is, that's like an open marketplace, right? The cathedral is representative of the church and its centralized order and structure, very much like the Catholic Church, where the Pope is, basically some infallible, manifestation of God, basically, right? And then, the bazaar, where it's very chaotic and non-structured, and yet somehow, structure comes out of that, right? So it's really, the bazaar approach is really, the polar opposite of what you would intend software development and engineering to be on some level. Like it's messy, and it's not someone's not just sitting in a room making decisions and then things just happen and it's all clean room and everything's sweet, right? That's not how real life works. That's not how software development works. And even in the companies where they try to centralize everything, they all fail miserably and will continue to fail. It's that simple. In any event, let's get back. The fact that this bazaar style seemed to work and work well came as a distinct shock. As I learned my way around, I worked hard not just at individual projects, but also at trying to understand why the Linux world not only didn't fly apart in confusion, but seemed to go from strength to strength at a speed barely imaginable to cathedral builders. So, now that I finally managed to read ESR's words to you, interjections aside, if you take nothing else from reading this quoted piece of his post, or from my post rather, then I sincerely hope that it is the realization that tech, like so many other human systems, tends to evolve and devolve in cycles that can be observed at a higher level, but generally only after the fact. It is exceedingly hard and generally foolhardy to believe that you can define the cycle while being within the cycle. However, that is the thing I am going to attempt to do here. So what is the cycle? Well, as the ESR aptly describes, the replacement of proprietary Unix by its now open source replacement, Linux, represented his personal awakening in terms of the cycle we have seen play out over and over again within tech. That is the cycle of centralization followed by decentralization. While tech companies are gaining economic power and influence, they tend to embrace the decentralized views of the day. They do this by appealing to people who exist outside of whatever the current mainstream of tech is defined as. Once they acquire a requisite level of economic power, their views, actions, and products tend to shift towards bolstering a more centralized approach to tech. This is because they believe that This is because once they have acquired this power, their mission shifts to preserving their grasp on that power. That is how power works, right? Once you have it, you must maintain it. And so it all becomes about the power. It devours everything else, right? Convincing us that we need them and no substitutes will suffice is how they get there. So that's really key here, and this is just a constant theme in tech. So this happened with IBM mainframes decades ago. This happened and is still playing out with Microsoft Windows. We are seeing this cycle also play out in the current smartphone duopoly. Most importantly, the cycle is driving all of the biggest tech trends of the last few decades. This list includes the cloud and, of course, AI. We discussed that last week. That's a crock of shit, but that's what they're calling it. I spent years whining about, they're calling instead of calling people, well, security professionals isn't the word, calling unofficial security non-professionals, like the media insisted on calling them hackers instead of crackers. And that community for years, myself included, took offense at this because you kind of get to choose what you're called, theoretically anyway. However, hackers traditionally from a tech standpoint are people who tinker around and figure things out and make things work. It's basically just like, redneck engineering basically is what it's really supposed to be, that kind of thing, right? No shade being thrown at redneck engineers. Redneck engineering is the core base spirit of what engineering is supposed to be. Practical results, get shit done, make shit work, right? Okay, so, but yeah, it's yeah. Engineering is what's important, right? But making stuff work. And anyway, there's an old phrase that I used to hear when I first started out. I still hear it sometimes, but it is a relatively rare reference, as most of the people old enough to remember the time when this was true Not me. I'm actually a bit too young to make that particular claim. I've long since retired. Never said this, but I had heard it a million times when I was first starting off. Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. Like that used to be like a thing, and people would, sometimes say it as if it's a defense. People would sometimes ironically pull it out like they're just like, nobody gets fired. Like you can't, if you pick IBM, you're not going to get fired because you just, that's okay no matter what, right? Now that decision has probably driven a lot of organizations to waste a ton of money over many, many decades. This whole thing here, and the reason, of course, is that IBM is fucking terrible. And I say that as somebody who is currently using a Linux distribution, Bluefin, which is based on Universal Blue, which is run through Fedora, which is basically not owned, but operated and financed by Red Hat, who is actually owned by IBM. So I bite the hand that feeds me, and fuck them, because that's how it is. Fuck IBM, okay? It's that simple, right? Come get me, bitches. In any event, the basic thinking with this phrase, of course, is that if everyone is buying IBM, then it's the least risky choice one could make. Sure, you could adopt tech produced by a competitor, but if the project goes south, there's a large chance in the aftermath you're going to get saddled with the blame, because guess what? You didn't buy IBM. Oh, the humanity. The same mindset exists today, and it's gotten far worse. In our current cycle, we've seen this play out with the cloud, and now we're seeing it play out with AI. All the movers and shakers in tech have embraced the cloud. Nobody even blinks an eye when it comes to deploying their brand new service/product on Azure or AWS. These same movers and shakers have also embraced AI. Why are they doing this? Well, to hear them tell it, it's because these things are inevitable. But are they? Are they really? Once upon a time, proprietary Unix was also considered to be inevitable. Hence, one of the reasons why I quoted ESR here. With the exception of Mac OS, it's basically dead tech now, which is, if you don't know this, yet another fun, little piece of trivia associated with software lineage is that of all the proprietary Unixes available and that existed, whether it be Sun OS/Solaris, whether it be HPUX, AIX, whatever, right? There's few. There's an endless number of these. There's IRIX. It just goes on and on and on. But the only one, I think AIX is still sort of a thing IBM pushes in some of their enterprise customers, but nobody gives a shit about AIX anymore, right? So that their AIX, I think, is still pissing around a little bit. Solaris is still kind of lurching forward under the stewardship of Oracle, but it's basically a zombie operating system at this point. AIX isn't getting a lot of love. I mean, everything with IBM outside of mainframes, really, and their silly, stupid AS400 mini computer bullshit fest, which that shit can just die because it's crap. And those of you who know me and use those things, yeah, I'm talking to you. Okay, not going to mention any names, but you really need to dump the AS400, loser. Okay, yeah, it's specific. That person knows who they are. Okay, nevertheless, okay, so that my IBM mostly talks about Linux now. IBM is a big backer of Linux, just like Microsoft is, just like Amazon is, just like Google is, right? Like Linux is basically it at this point, at least in terms of server and cloud and AI. Like it is the king over all those areas. There's just no doubt about it. In any event, once upon a time, proprietary Unix was inevitable, and now it's not. The only proprietary Unix that is of any measure and means anything that still stands today is Mac OS/iOS or tvOS. And I have a number of Mac products in my life. I don't have any Macintoshes, but I do use Apple products for my phone and the TV streamer boxes and things. So I have some level of experience with that, and they work pretty well, right? Like if you're going to buy some proprietary software and do something, and on the phone side, this is sadly an unavoidable thing, really, in my mind anyway, depending on your use case. Maybe you could slither by on an Ubuntu phone experience. Maybe you're willing to put up with the downsides and the drama that comes with Graphene OS, right? But even then, I debate the future of Graphene OS because it is tied to Android and Google's ongoing support for, third-party ROMs, which over the last few years, they made a lot of concerning moves on that front. So I don't think that's going to last either. And so then you end up with a few other Linux phone things. I think there's Purism's got some stuff going on, and I would not recommend you buy any Purism product, just to be really, really clear. And if you want to know why, you can go search on this site for a series of 3 blog posts I did for their Libra M5 crowdfunding campaign years ago. Purism is not a company to be trusted. They are liars. They are cheaters, and you should not give them a dime of your money, because you will regret it. In any event, like, there's not like a Linux phone. Man, I used to have such hope that would be a thing. I mean, I have crowdfunded the Libra M5 before I got a refund, and I managed to get one before they stopped giving out refunds, so I got off easy on that one. But it's like the Linux phone, just, I mean, Android's as close as you can get, and Android is basically a Linux abomination because it's more of a cathedral managed system, right? And it used to be that Android, not forks but variants, let's say, like Nothing OS or Color OS or whatever the fuck Samsung calls theirs. I don't know. I don't care. I don't care about Samsung products at this point. But nevertheless, like, it used to be that these versions of Android could have like reasonably significant differences in terms of how things are managed. But as Google over the years has realigned how Android is developed and managed, they've centralized a lot of that, and so now it's become more of a cathedral than a bazaar, right? Because so much of Android and its behavior and its functionality are really derived from the closed source Google Play Services layer rather than the open source Android open source project layer, AOSP, which does not roll off the tongue easy, mind you. Nevertheless, this is the thing, right? And so we're awash in proprietary software, except for Linux, which is nice. But but proprietary software is not doing so great now. I just basically gave Apple a ton of compliments before, because it's not terrible, right? Like, my experience using an iPhone is drastically better than my experience using an Android phone. It's just that simple. And I hate paying the Apple tax, but what are you gonna do, right? Like, I need a functional phone. I need to use mobile apps to authenticate with work and things like that. I don't really have a choice. So at the end of the day, it's either Android or iPhone, right? In any event, all of these things used to be inevitable, and they're not anymore. Proprietary Unix is absolutely not inevitable anymore. Once upon a time, Windows was inevitable. And a few decades later now, Windows is basically in a tailspin because Microsoft has just constantly... It used to be the running joke with Windows was every other version was decent, and that lasted right up until every other version went to shit. And that started with Windows 8. I mean, it's that simple. Like, if you're really honest with yourself about when Windows really... Because Microsoft was always kind of overbearing, but there was a time in which Microsoft cared about customers, and they embraced customers, and they worked with customers. Now they don't, right? But yeah, proprietary software is getting worse because proprietary software is increasingly not being developed to meet the needs of the users. It's being developed to service the needs of the people running the software, right? And that's basically the big objection with Windows. They want you to use AI. They want you to get hooked on those services. Every one of these companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, they want to get you into their service structure. They want you to get hooked on one or more services and that they can bill you every single month. Nobody wants to sell you something once a year anymore. At least they'll take it if that's what they have to do, but they'd rather just start getting you every month. Boom, boom, boom. Like, I pay for YouTube Premium, right? Every month I'm getting bam, 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 right? Like, that's what they want. I pay for some Apple membership that bundles in a bunch of their crap. It's like $40 a month or some shit, right? Boom, boom, boom. That's what happens, right? Those are my 2 biggest subscriptions, by the way. Beyond that, I barely pay for, like, it's almost nothing else. So that's cool, I guess. So other than those 2, I'm basically scot-free at this point. I've managed to kill them all, but yeah, it's just one of these things, right? That's what they want, though, and so that's why these products are slowly starting to turn into revenue drivers for these subscription services. They want the consistency of that month to month, boom, boom, boom. They don't want to wait once every year or 2 years. Like, when Apple sells me an iPhone, they actually support an iPhone a long time. So I've had my iPhone almost 4 years now, right? And my goal is to get it to 5. So next year, I will, at least toy with the idea of upgrading my iPhone 13, right? And I bought it right before the 14 came out because I know there are those of you sitting there saying, "Oh, but it's almost 5 years old." Yeah. But when you're an idiot like me and you buy an iPhone 13 like a month and a half before the 14 comes out, and you know this because you follow tech, you just don't care, which is fine. It's a great phone. I got no problem with it, right? So I'm really happy with it. But I've had it 4 years. I still have it. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking. So what more can you say? In any event, let's get back on track here, right? The thing is, with all of these products, these inevitability things, and this is just an argument over and over again in tech, and this is the argument you will hear every single day for AI. It's inevitable. No, the fuck it ain't. They're lying. They're full of shit. None of these companies make a dime. They're going down, baby. I predicted last week that Anthropic would file for an IPO in short order. The next fucking day after I put that post up, they announced it. So there you go. Every once in a while, I'm right. I root to be wrong because I'm not predicting great things. But you know what? Sometimes when you're right, you're right. In any event, let's get back to it. So what's wrong with the cloud, right? Because I've been shitting on the cloud as well as AI here. Well, long story short, as an organization, especially a tech organization that embraces the cloud, you are basically outsourcing key portions of your autonomy and agency to possible future competitors. Even in the event that Google, Amazon, and Microsoft don't want to directly compete with you, guess what? They don't have to, because they sold this entire industry on the idea that nobody but them is qualified to manage basic tech infrastructure. They have created a system because they have. I'm sorry, yeah, I read that wrong. I was a little confused by my grammar there. Anyway, they have created a system where they directly profit for nearly everything everybody does. See, they don't have to innovate anymore. The invention of the cloud is basically big tech's way of just getting a piece of everybody's pie. They just like the devil. Kaiser Soze says the greatest trick the devil pulled was convincing them they don't exist. The greatest trick big tech ever pulled was convincing all you stupid motherfuckers that you need them to do anything, and that's what they've done. That's what the cloud is. It's like, oh my god, I need AWS. I need DynamoDB, man, bro. You could just install Mongo in a Docker container. What the fuck are you talking about? Oh, I need this. I need that. I need. It's just crazy. I've got to have Lambda, man. Oh God, I need that Lambda. Give me that crack. It's just like it's an addiction with people, and every time they come out with something new, it's like everyone's playing buzzword bingo. They got to mark the space off on their card, otherwise they won't be a real tech person anymore. I don't give two flying fucks about anything in AWS. I don't give a shit about anything in Azure. That is not how we're solving customer problems. It can help, certainly. Like if you have huge scalability needs and you have got a deep pockets, the cloud certainly is going to come in handy because they are dealing with scalability at a different level than I think almost everyone else is, right? And so there are advantages to that. However, everyone thinks they need something that is scalable to infinity. You're not fucking Buzz Lightyear. Chill the fuck out, son. You don't. Like, it's just crazy. Like, some of the best work I've done in my career is work that is just meant for a small group of people and just totally enables those users to really just perform at a level they couldn't before because somebody sat down, went through their workflows, looked at their problems, and figured out how to make something work that met their specific needs instead of just trying to like cookie cutter everything. But yeah, that's the thing with these companies. They sold all of you, on the idea that you need them to do anything. And, proprietary software has really always been kind of like that on some level, right? But like with the cloud services, so much more insidious because, with proprietary software, you buy a license for, Photoshop CS3 or whatever, right? And that's great. You use that as long as it works and it just doesn't break, or you upgrade to a new version of Windows and that version still works, you can keep on using it. But then somewhere along the way, that's now a subscription piece of software. So you don't get a license. And now if you buy it, well, you have to buy it every month and you have to keep paying. And if you don't, it's gone. That's crazy. That's the thing. Like in the earlier model, at the very least, it's companies had to make the effort, right? So, if Photoshop CS2 was still meeting my needs and CS5 or 6 comes out or whatever, right? Well, if they don't have any features I want, then I don't have to give them money. Like they didn't make a compelling enough argument, right? It's basically what it comes down to. They really had to come up with things and do things to get me to pony up. But see, now with subscriptions, they don't have to do shit. It's just they basically are rent seeking. They've turned you in from somebody who buys the car and owns the car and maintains the car, and then occasionally, gets tired of maintaining the car and decides to, start the cycle over again by getting a newer car. Now you're just basically leasing a car. And if you lease a car in long term, you're probably making a bad financial choice, because that's not a great one. And you'll never be off the hook. There's no way to get off the hook. Oh, sure, you can pay the balloon payment at the end to own the car, but no one's going to actually do that, right? Okay, so yeah, that almost probably, I bet that happens like 0.01% of the time. Anyway, you don't even get that option in subscription software. And this is the issue. Right? They have changed the fundamentals of this business model, and they've done it in such a way that now they get a piece of all the pies, because they sold us all on this bullshit that we need them. We don't need them. What the best part is about tech is that no matter how big any company gets, no matter how expansive and far-reaching and invasive their product lines are, it doesn't matter. Two guys in a garage can still come up with a good idea and kick the living shit out of them. And that's the best part. That's why you don't need Google or Amazon. We all still have access to so many things. And there's so many things out there, so many high quality, free to use tools that enable you to build all kinds of crazy shit that you could never do before. And it's awesome. Anyway, all right, soapbox done, right? Yeah, this whole thing's a soapbox, so I'm lying, but yeah. Anyway, they sold us all on the fact that you need them for everything, and now they just directly get a piece of the pie and a chunk of the profit of everything everyone does. Even if you're failing and you're paying them, they're still making money, right? So they don't need to innovate. All they need to do is just sell infrastructure access to you, right? That's right. If we build everything on top of their tech, they don't have to innovate. They don't have to innovate, and that's why they don't. That's why they just constantly engage in rent-seeking behavior. How did we go from Amazon Prime being a subscription that got you 2-day shipping and video service access and music service access to now it's totally enshittified? Most people don't get the 2-day delivery speed anymore. Most people, now they started putting ads into the free my ass video tier and of course the Amazon Music tier. It's crazy. It's insane. And people just take it, man. All they're trying to do is just gobble up more and more, because they're trying to fill a void that can never be filled. Soulless big tech corporations, right? Anyway, right? So they no longer need to compete in a scenario where they establish themselves as a baseline dependency of virtually everything being created. This is by design. Microsoft doesn't care if you use Windows or not, because the real money is in convincing enterprises to make use of Azure. Amazon doesn't care if you shop at their site, because the real money is in convincing enterprises to make use of AWS. Of course, whenever any of these platforms experiences a major outage, massive portions of the internet suddenly become unavailable. Productivity, that is a grammar error. Productivity can grind to a halt for hours or days at a time. It's a shame more tech professionals don't consider these incidents to be harbingers of a possible future in which the cloud becomes even less reliable, which it absolutely will be. One of my counter arguments to the cloud for years have been, they know more about scaling things than I do. No doubt about it, right? I'll hand that to them on a silver platter right now. But they're also dealing with scale. They might be 10 times better at dealing with scalability than I am, but they're dealing with problems that are 1,000 times more complicated because of the scales they're dealing with. So that's maybe not good enough. That might actually be a bad deal, right? Like, not everything needs to be rolled into everything else. And I think that's one of the things that really emphasizes more than any other the cathedral nature of tech nowadays, right? It's just one cathedral after another, and it's crazy, right? So with all that being said, the first step to becoming a Big Tech Exile is to reject this notion that you must build dependencies and services offered by Big Tech in order to compete, much less succeed in tech. The second step is to reject AI as a subsequent follow-up to this. Why would one reject AI? Well, we'll throw out a list of reasons real quick as a primer. How about that? AI is trained on data stolen from everybody. They claim the right to copyright their models, but those models were built on the idea that they had the right to universally ignore your right to copyright your creations. They raped every video, image, piece of art, blog post, news article, piece of classic literature, music, and code, both properly licensed and not properly licensed. That's a whole nother rant we're not going to touch on. Actually, I'm really not going to touch on it. You're welcome. We'll get to it at some point, I'm sure. And then sought to sell us access to the output generated from their theft. And then the part that's not even mentioned here is they whine when, Chinese orgs produce models like DeepSeek, and they say, oh my God, they just created that by stealing outputs from our models. They stole from us. Now, man, I love it. I wish everyone could steal everything from every AI company, because they built their entire business on theft. And if there's any sense of karma or karmatic force in the universe, we should be stealing everything from the AI companies, because they stole everything from us and they deserve it. In any event, right? So they're selling us access to our own, to the stuff they stole from us. So that's fucking great, isn't it? I love it. So AI is a nightmare for natural resources. Data centers are being created for the sole purpose of bolstering the infrastructure required to implement this tech. These data centers suck down huge amounts of power, wastewater, pollute the air, and emit noise pollution, and forms what you can, some forms you can hear and some you cannot. Yeah, we'll fix that too. AI is defective by design. The appropriate term for AI is actually probabilistic computing. Up until now, most of the work in tech revolved around the creation of deterministic constructs that would take input without or with a structured format and produce output in a structured format. Man, I'm finding grammar errors out the yin yang today. These were rules that were applied and enforced on both the input and output sides of the equation. Probabilistic computing dispenses with all of this. It just takes in a stream of shit and throws back another stream of shit. And anyone who thinks it's doing anything other than that has been suckered. You fell for the parlor trick, sorry to say. Yeah. But, none of those reasons outline the primary reason classic tech practitioners ought to be rejecting AI. Because the primary reason is far worse. Just like we outsourced our infrastructure to big tech via the mechanism we now refer to as the cloud, AI is a ploy to encourage us to outsource our actual thinking to big tech. When somebody asks a question at work, where I work right now, it is not uncommon to hear the following response. Have you tried asking Copilot? I cannot tell you how much that pisses me off every time I hear it. And if anyone from work is watching, please don't ever fucking say that to me unless you're trolling me, because I hate it, and it's a trigger, baby. Okay? Anyway, I cannot think of a more offensive response than that one. But it is useful in that it belies the baseline truth of this trend. People don't want to think about things. Much like those who find themselves deeply entrenched within any kind of cult, whether it be political or religious in nature, the primary defense of the trend falls back to what may in fact be humanity's favorite logical fallacy of all time: appeal to authority. And we're just going to quote that. I got the link open here. There's a link to a whole, if you want to familiarize yourself, which if you're discussing anything on the internet, you really should familiarize yourself with basic logical fallacies. Insisting that a claim is true simply because a valid authority or expert on the issue said it was true, without any other supporting evidence offered, which is pretty much the cloud AI. It's just every tech makes these arguments. Like, everyone has to use React now, right? React is just crap created by Meta. And Meta, to be fair to Meta, Facebook, they were trying to solve very specific problems that made sense from their perspective, right? Like, these are problems they had in terms of page load speed. They wanted to combine server and client-side rendering, right? Send down a server-side rendered version of a page and then allow client-side rendering to make modifications on top of that. That was the basic initial draw of React. That was the problem they were trying to solve. They wanted to increase that, they decreased the amount of time the initial view on Facebook took to render. That was the big deal for them, right? And yet here we are now, right? Where now it's like some sort of fucking religion for front-end development. And I go through React web apps and I'm just absolutely shocked. Like, everything has to be turned into a component. Every tiny little thing. It used to be, in my day, you would make things into a component when you wanted to reuse them. The componentization was driven by a direct need to reuse these things. But in React land, you have layers of just, it's like looking at a fossil layer over a million years or something. And the component. And it's like, and it's just these tiny little things, and you're jumping between this file and that. It's just, I don't know. It's almost like that style of development also belies, an increasing level of ADD. Like, we can't just have a procedure that does things. We can't just have a screen with reusable components that we put in there. Everything has to be tiny and compact because my attention span can't grasp it otherwise. I don't know what it is. I don't like it, obviously, but In any event, right? The incontrovertible truth is that each one of these tech trends acts to centralize power in the small hands, into the hands of, well, the small hands, they have small hands, into the hands of a small group of tech oligarchs who now wield incredible wealth, influence, and hence power. They have become virtually unaccountable. However, there is absolutely nothing stopping all of us from opting out of this. If enough of us begin to opt out of these business models, these companies will be forced to adapt by providing us the kinds of services and products we are willing to pay for, because ultimately they want to make money, right? They are going to push things that lock us in and make them more money over the long term. But if nobody buys those things, they will be forced to stop pushing said things. We ultimately wield the power here. We simply need to exercise it appropriately. So my willingness to advocate this position while being part of an industry that absolutely benefits from this continued malfeasance and society's willingness to turn a blind eye to it is what has ultimately led to my, quote unquote exile. My problem solving skills are very much on point. My ability to code competent and stable solutions are still very relevant and useful, right? But those are no longer the top line skills that employers are seeking. They want to quiz you on design patterns, and I fucking hate design patterns. We will rant about that one at some point, because design patterns, anti-patterns, I never want to hear those words ever again. I can't stand any of that shit. Anyway, it's just like you turn the conversation into just everything's just like it's like that old kids game where they got the different shapes and they got to put them in the right holes. That's basically what you've turned engineering into there. And yeah, you can argue it's a common form of communication, but it's just everyone's thinking just becomes hamstringed by these concepts, I think, and it's ridiculous. But yeah, they want you to solve cute gotcha leak code problems. They want you to make sure that you can effectively go through whatever the current accepted practices are around ritually trying to draw any kind of non-hallucinatory output out of whatever LLM you have been saddled with for coding. Ultimately, my focus on actual fundamentals that used to matter, still matter, just aren't consciously observed by a lot of people in the hiring process has made me into a pariah. When I was a young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed engineer, I just for the record, I've never had a tail. It's just a phrase, man. I'm not a furry. Just want to make that clear. I'm not a cat. I had a collection of quips. Most of those quips did not stand the test of time. An example of one of those quips that did not age well was, I work with computers because I like them a lot more than people. Now, I have said some variation on that so many times over the years, it's ridiculous. But I don't say it anymore, because the primary problem with that statement is it is absolutely not true. As I came to eventually realize, every part of building software really is about the people. If you aren't focused on the people, you are completely missing the point. And I say that to every software architect and principal engineer I have ever met, for the most part. It's about the people, stupid. On the flip side, here's another quip that has absolutely stood the test of time and has become more relevant than ever for me. If you don't understand a thing, you can't control a thing. This one underscores the biggest failure in our current cargo cult thinking around AIs and LLMs. The people embracing this tech act like it's the second coming of Christ, have no idea how it actually works, and they don't care. A not insignificant number of the enthusiasts believe that it can reason, think, and act as an independent entity which can be reliably consulted, tapped, and trusted. Many of them believe that this tech will result in AGI being achieved. AGI being artificial general intelligence. Yeah, that's it. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a fucking pipe dream that's not happening anytime soon. And if anyone's selling you blowing smoke up your ass telling you otherwise, they're full of shit. They suffer from AI psychosis. As simple as that. Or they're looking to cash out in some forthcoming IPOs. You feel me? Nothing could be further from the truth, though. But the truth is no longer in vogue, and that is true politically as well as technically. We live in an age where truth is spat upon and frankly, not something we're interested in, and that is really sad. But yeah, if you want to be exiled from big tech, all you really have to do is start calling bullshit. That's it. Tech used to be a semi-welcoming place for those of us who were willing to do it. Spitting in the face of trends was never a huge problem because it was generally never quite this much on the line in terms of money and trust for any particular trend. In addition, most of the crazier trends of the past didn't have this kind of reach or last this long, but times have changed. When the AI bubble pops, the reputation of big tech will pop right along with it. And I cannot say I'll be too sorry to see that happen. There are, of course, other opinions I have that spit in the face of other ideas considered to be sacrosanct in this industry, but I think we can save all that for another post on another day, as this one has gone on quite long enough. As it stands, I've done enough damage for the time being. So I just say to you, may fate treat you all kindly until the next time we meet. Thanks for hanging out. Really appreciate you all taking the time, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.